Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. US President Joe Biden says another attack on the Kabul airport is highly likely in the next 24 to 36 hours. In a statement, Biden promised further strikes against the ISIS in retaliation for a deadly bombing outside the airport. The US Embassy in Kabul also warned Americans to leave the airport immediately, citing specific credible threats. The Yemeni government says the Houthi rebels have killed at least 30 soldiers in an attack on a military base in Laj province. The officials say 60 others got injured when the rebels hit Al-Anad air base with missiles and drones. The Houthi rebels have not yet commented on the attack. At least 6 Palestinians have been injured after Israel bombed the Gaza Strip, violating the truce yet again. The Israeli military claimed that the airstrikes targeted the Hamas positions in the Strip. The attack comes after Palestinian groups announced to resume protests at the Israel-Gaza border against Tel Aviv restrictions on the enclave. Pakistan has expanded COVID-19 restrictions to 27 cities in the provinces of Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa amid rising infections. The country has registered 69 deaths and more than 3,900 infections overnight. Meanwhile, Mexico has reported 756 daily deaths and more than 17,000 new cases. Globally, the death toll is over 4.4 million, while the caseload is approaching 216 million. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. US President Joe Biden says another attack on the Kabul airport is highly likely in the next 24 to 36 hours. In a statement, Biden promised further strikes against the ISIS in retaliation for a deadly bombing outside the airport. This report has the details. As the U.S. neared the end of its 2-decade-long military involvement in the country, its troops have been killed in an ISIS attack outside the Kabul airport. Following the attack, the U.S. said it has killed 2 ISIS attack planners in Nangarhar airstrike and wounded another. Meanwhile, the U.S. Embassy in Kabul has warned Americans to leave the airport immediately, citing specific credible threats. A Western security official says the U.S. is in the final phase of its evacuation from Kabul, with just over 1,000 civilians left to be flown out. Moreover, the Taliban forces have sealed off the airport to most Afghans hoping to leave. The Taliban say the group and the departing U.S. forces aim for a swift handover of the Kabul airport. UN envoy to Kabul, Zalmay Khalilzad, has welcomed the Taliban statement that it will not prevent anyone from leaving Kabul. Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said the Afghans who intend to leave can proceed after commercial flights resume. The group also assured political leaders of their security and safety and urged welfare of the people. Earlier, the Taliban said they were preparing a new cabinet, adding that its makeup would be cleared in a week or 2. Meanwhile, the resistance forces have rejected Taliban's claims that they have entered the Panjshir Valley. Head of the resistance front, Mohammad Almaz Zahid, said there is no fight in the valley and no one has entered the province. It comes after the Taliban claimed that their forces had entered Panjshir from several directions without facing any resistance. Russian envoy to Kabul, Dmitry Zhernov, said the Kabul can take over Panjshir within hours, but said they don't want to proceed to avoid bloodshed. Zhernov said that ISIS attack at the Kabul airport has challenged the Taliban, not the United States. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says peace and stability in Afghanistan will benefit the entire region. In a statement, Qureshi cautioned that abandoning Afghanistan will affect all its neighbors negatively. He said India has pulled together different terrorist groups to carry out malign activities in Pakistan. Qureshi warned that India is trying to destabilize the regional peace and stressed upon keeping a strict vigil over such designs. While National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf urged the international community to stay engaged with the Afghan leadership. The advisor said a security vacuum in Kabul will lead to spreading of terrorism in the region. Yusuf called for an internationally coordinated effort for durable stability backed with an economic plan. Since the Taliban took over Kabul, hundreds of Afghans have crossed the border into Pakistan amid the economic crisis. Prices of food and other necessities in Afghanistan has been rising while the banks are closed. In Canada, hundreds of people have marched through Toronto to protest the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. The protesters demanded that the Canadian government to help rescue Afghans still stranded in Kabul. Over in Greece, hundreds of Afghans marched to the U.S. Embassy. They appealed to the international community for peace and not to abandon Afghanistan. Protesters also gathered in Paris and called on the international community not to give up on trying to help the Afghan population. Meanwhile, in Germany, Afghan evacuees are quarantining in a U.S. military's airbase before they can move to another country. The Yemeni government says Houthis have killed at least 30 soldiers in an attack on a military base in large province. The targeted Al-Anad air base belongs to forces of the Saudi-led coalition. The officials say over 60 others got injured after the rebels hit the base with missiles and drones. A Southern Forces spokesperson said the death toll may rise as rescuers are still clearing the scene. Several loud blasts were reportedly heard in the area. The rebels have not yet commented on the attack. The Yemeni government and Houthis have been locked in war since 2014 when the rebels seized the capital Sana'a. At least 6 Palestinians have been injured after Israel bombed the Gaza Strip, violating the truce yet again. The Israeli military claimed that the airstrikes targeted the Hamas positions in the Strip. The military alleged that the strikes were in response to incendiary balloons launched from the Palestinian enclave. The attack comes after Palestinian groups announced to resume protest at the Israel-Gaza border against Tel Aviv's restrictions on the enclave. An Egyptian-mediated truce ended the May conflict in which Israel carried out airstrikes across the coastal enclave. At least 250 Palestinians and 13 people in Israel were killed in 11 days of fighting. The United Nations says Israeli forces have killed 55 Palestinians by live ammunition in the occupied West Bank so far this year. In its reports, the UN said 527 Palestinian-owned structures were demolished in Area C of the West Bank. The report also highlighted that forced demolition caused 733 people to migrate from the area. Israel prevents Palestinians from carrying out construction projects in parts of the West Bank designated as Area C. International law views both the West Bank and East Jerusalem as occupied territories and considers all Jewish settlements there illegal. Iran's supreme leader says the current U.S. government is no different from the previous one over its behavior on the nuclear deal. Ali Husseini Khamenei made the remarks during a meeting with President Ibrahim Raisi's newly formed cabinet. Khamenei said Washington truly has no shame on the nuclear issue. He said the U.S. withdrew from the JCPOA, but it makes demands as it was Iran that pulled out. The supreme leader went on to say U.S. foreign policy is likely a predator wolf that sometimes changes to a cunning fox. This comes hours after a top Iranian security official accused U.S. President Joe Biden of illegally threatening Tehran. Earlier, in a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister, Biden said the U.S. may consider other options if nuclear diplomacy with Tehran fails. Mexico has registered 756 daily deaths from COVID-19 and more than 17,000 new cases. Globally, the death toll is over 4.4 million, while the caseload is approaching 216 million. More in this report. The coronavirus-related restrictions and vaccinations have proven so far the key to getting back to normalcy. Italy says it will eliminate, on August 31st, a 5-day mandatory quarantine for travelers from the UK. In France, the number of people in intensive care units dipped for the first time in 9 days. Over in Germany, thousands marched in Berlin to protest against restrictions even after demonstrations were banned. Police said protesters had gathered for unauthorized marches in different parts of the city center.
There were some attacks on local forces coming out of these demonstrations, throwing bottles or physical assaults. At the moment, we can report some 80 detentions. Unfortunately, we must also report 4 injured police, so we cannot talk about a totally peaceful demonstration.
New Zealand has reported 83 locally acquired cases of the highly infectious Delta variant. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says some changes on how the outbreak is managed could be announced on Monday. In Australia, New South Wales saw a record 1,218 overnight infections. The vast majority was in Sydney, the epicenter of the Delta-fueled outbreak, with an additional 6 deaths. Authorities urged citizens to get vaccinated, fearing the worst is still to come.
For example, given the case numbers are where they are, I suspect in October we'll probably have the highest number that we do in intensive care. I suspect we've not reached the peak yet there at all. But how hard we work now will make sure we keep people out of hospital, and that's really important.
Thailand says it expects to have 140 million doses of vaccines this year as it ramps up inoculation to fight its biggest wave of infections. The United Arab Emirates says it will resume issuing tourist visas to vaccinated travelers from 30th of August. Pakistan has expanded COVID-19 restrictions to 27 cities in the provinces of Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, citing the pressure on healthcare system. In early August, the health authorities had revised the SOPs for 13 cities, which were to remain in effect till the end of this month. They said the decision was taken in view of the growing number of COVID-19 positive cases. As per the rules, all commercial activities will be closed by 8 p.m. except essential services. Indoor dining and weddings will be banned, and shrines and cinema halls will remain closed. Meanwhile, offices, public transport and educational institutions will operate at 50% capacity. The country's death toll has exceeded 25,600 with 69 new fatalities overnight. In the U.S., Hurricane Ida is expected to make landfall in Louisiana on Sunday as an extremely dangerous storm. The Category 4 storm is bringing 140 miles per hour winds. In the U.S., the massive Caldor fire continues raging in California amid efforts to avoid it from reaching the Lake Tahoe region. Authorities say the western and eastern edges remain the most active. Officials say the blaze has burned more than 152,000 acres so far and is 19% contained. It churned through mountains just southwest of Tahoe Basin, cloaking much of the area in toxic smoke. The firefighters hope to take advantage of calmer winds before the hot, heavy gusts returned. The southwest winds are expected to move across the fire on Sunday night through Tuesday. Paris' Arc de Triomphe monument will be enveloped in a shimmering rubble in a posthumous installation by artist Christo. More in this report.
The envelopment of the world-recognized Arc de Triomphe monument is a tribute to the late artist couple Christo and Jean-Claude, who dreamed for decades of the project.
Christo said, I would only like to wrap the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. That's the one thing I really would like to do. And then what happened was they said, okay, and they talked to Philippe Belaval, who is the president of the Center of Monument National, who loved the idea, and he brought it to President Macron, and that's how the whole thing happened and started in 2017.
Workers have erected scaffolding around 19th century arc to set it up for the silvery blue recyclable plastic wrapping. The monument will be on view between September 18 and October 3rd this year.
Now we have another month to go before the opening. So most of the steel, as you can see, the steel to protect is installed, the cable system is installed, the bolts are installed, the weights at the bottom are installed. And right now we are placing the protection for the little corniche where the cherry picker is there now.
Christopher Javashev was known for his larger-than-life installations. Christo wrapped up a stretch of coastline in Australia and the Reichstag Parliament building in Berlin. He also worked closely with Jean-Claude and covered Paris's Pont Neuf Bridge in yellow cloth in 1975.
More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Switzerland has started the construction of its largest alpine solar plant to help secure renewable energy throughout the year. The 2.2 megawatt project is a part of Swiss plans to plug the gap left by the phase out of nuclear energy. More in this report.
Strategies to limit the impacts of climate change have become divisive in Switzerland. Under the government's Energy Strategy 2050, Switzerland plans to increase energy production from renewables and hydro generation, aiming to add 2 terawatts by 2040. The project manager says the transition is going on to a certain extent, but will eventually gain momentum.
This is the idea to have installations in other places as well, like here on a dam, on a hydropower dam, but it could be made on infrastructure in general.
The Alpine location will let the Mud-Sea plant deliver half its production during the winters, when sunlight is generally in short supply in Switzerland. Solar plants at lower elevations produce only around a quarter of their electricity during this half of the year. Switzerland imports electricity, especially from European Union, in the colder months. But snags in relations with the European Union mean Switzerland must urgently up its winter energy production.
Need is bigger in winter than in summer, and it will be even more so in the future. So therefore we're looking for a high alpine installation for a balanced yield, that is not only in summer but also in winter.
Nuclear power last year generated a third of the country's electricity, while fossil fuels still accounted for more than 60% of Switzerland's overall energy consumption. When it is completed, foreseeably by year-end, the Mud-Sea will have nearly 5,000 solar modules, producing around 3.3 million kilowatt-hours of electricity per year.
NASA has launched SpaceX's 23rd commercial resupply service mission to its International Space Station. The 2-stage Falcon 9 rocket blasted off from the agency's Kennedy Space Center in the U.S. state of Florida. The Dragon cargo capsule is packed with over 2,200 kilograms of supplies, scientific experiments and hardware. This also includes a new robotic arm that will be tested inside the space station's Bishop airlock. The rocket's reusable first stage returned to Earth a little less than 8 minutes after the lift-off. In a smooth touchdown, it landed on one of SpaceX's drone ships in the Atlantic Ocean. The launch was postponed from its original lift-off time a day before because of bad weather. In Peru, the global health crisis could not stop 200 couples from tying the knot in a mass wedding in the capital city of Lima. The wedding ceremony kicked off first by health screening of couples. Interestingly, ceremony included the oldest couple of 82-year-old groom and 87-year-old bride. Meanwhile, 24-year-old Marco Robles and 19-year-old Judith was the youngest couple. The ceremonies were aired via the Facebook page of Lima's municipality for relatives who were unable to attend. In North Korea, young citizens gathered to dance in the capital, Pyongyang, to celebrate Youth Day. They were welcomed by the locals of city's railway station. Later, thousands of people watched a dance party at Kim Il-sung Square. A fireworks display was also arranged at the evening gala. The Youth Day is celebrated in the country every year on 28th of August since 1991. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.com.